Donald Trump, meanwhile, is set to headline the 2024 Libertarian National Convention tomorrow night. That's, by the way, the Libertarian National Convention, not the Republican National Convention. This marks the first time in U.S. history that a presidential candidate of a rival party will address the convention of a party that is presumably going to nominate its own candidate. His invitation is sparking what our next guest is calling a civil war within the Libertarian Party. Joining us now is Nicholas Sarwark. He is the former chairman of the party and currently the executive director of the Libertarian Policy Institute. So, Nicholas, how did this come about? I mean, this would be like, what, Joe Biden addressing the RNC convention in Milwaukee this summer or something?
It would be like that. What happened in the Libertarian Party in 2022, a group of hostile takeover actors from outside the party seized control of the entire national convention, took over the entire national committee, and the chair of the National Committee, Angela McArdle, has taken the party systematically on a hard right or even alt-right turn. The first things they did at that convention were eliminate the platform plank against bigotry, remove the pro-choice stance that the Libertarian Party had historically had, fight back against immigration, which is something the Libertarian Party had been all about. And at the time, we said this is a MAGA operation. This is an attempt to co-opt and neuter the Libertarian Party because Donald Trump is afraid of a strong Libertarian candidate. And with the confirmation that Donald Trump is now going to speak and essentially have a rally to a captive audience of libertarians is just the end of the movie. It's where we were always going to go. And Angela McArdle, to be clear, is doing this in violation of the bylaws of the party. She refuses to allow the National Committee to have a vote. She's currently being sued in D.C. Superior Court to be removed for these violations of D.C. nonprofit law as well. And there's been decredentialing over the last day at the convention where longtime activists and party founders are having their credentials stripped illegally in order to shove Donald Trump down our throats.
I mean, historically, I could see that the Libertarian Party has in America been more aligned with the Republican Party than it has with the Democratic Party. But there doesn't seem very much about Donald Trump's agenda that is libertarian. I mean, you've got states more involved in women's health issues. You've got a rejection of the notion that there should be deficit reduction. I mean, he just doesn't seem to be interested in this. His policies going forward are going to be more interventionist, not less interventionist.
Donald Trump is anti-libertarian. And when I was chairman of the Libertarian National Committee during the George Floyd unrest, during Donald Trump's first term and probably only term, I put out a strong statement saying Donald Trump has nothing to do with libertarianism. His type of authoritarian, right-wing control of your body, control of your life is everything we stand against. And that's why, to be honest, I want to share something with you. This is the first time in 24 years that I have not been a delegate to my own party's convention because the Credentials Committee and the people who took over do not want a real libertarian party. They want to kneecap the party and knock us out of the race and basically force us to have a Trump rally. And I think that this weekend you'll see the civil war will end and we will be victorious and the Libertarian Party will go back to being a real political party and Donald Trump will get the reception that he so richly deserves.
Nicholas, there's a functional question that comes to mind when I hear of this civil war in the Libertarian Party, and that is that third parties like the Libertarian Party usually come into being because the two so-called major parties don't represent all of what they want represented. Isn't by bringing Trump in and in many ways trying to combine the parties, doesn't it eliminate even the need for a Libertarian Party? I mean, how does the Libertarian Party then later justify its being if it is overtaken and becomes perceived to be a merger with the Republican nominee?
You have hit it right on the head, Al. It is going to be an existential fight because if the Libertarian Party is successfully given to MAGA and sacrificed on the altar of a Donald Trump reelect, then it will cease to exist as an independent party that is neither left nor right, but something different. And what Angela McArdle has right now is authority. She has the power to basically put Donald Trump on stage after our presidential candidates debate for the nomination, but she doesn't have the power to make libertarians like it. And one of the things that libertarians are famous for is we're individualists and we really don't like being told what to do. So it's backfiring already. That's why there's even more lawsuits. It looks like an officer of the Michigan party is likely to be held in contempt by a state court. We're very hard to manage.
You don't like being told what to do by your chairman of your own party or by a former president either. Former chairman of the Libertarian Party and still fighting, Nicholas Sarwark, thank you very much for coming in to join us. Looking forward to hearing what happens this weekend.